Hi, Valerie here, your Italy correspondent for International Living. I'm here today to talk to you about the traditions and culture of Italy. There's so much to say. Italy has had so many centuries and millennium actually of history to draw on for their cultural wealth, for their cultural life, and for the traditions that they hold very tightly here. That I could spend the rest of the year doing a podcast or a video series just talking about the traditions around the country and still not exhaust what there is to experience about culture and traditional life here in Italy. It really is one of the things that drew us to Italy. It's one of the things we love about life here is that they cling very tightly to their traditions. They've been going on for centuries, in some cases more than a millennia. And so it's a really beautiful thing about living in Italy is to experience these various aspects of the traditions that they hold very tightly. They vary from region to region. So the things that we have here in our region in the south of Basilicata are completely different than the types of traditions you're going to see in the north of the country. It's one of the really great things about traveling around Italy is you get to experience these different cultural aspects, these different festivals, and different events that are tied to these regional traditions. So I'm going to talk to you about my region because I could talk about the entire country, but it would take me probably the rest of the year to focus on the traditions and culture around the country because it's just so overwhelming. There are so many traditions nationwide that it would take me a really long time to talk about them all. So I'm going to focus on my region of Basilicata, which is itself also a tradition because campanalismo is a thing here in Italy. Campanalismo derives from the word campanile for the bell tower. And this indicates the pride and trust that one has in their own area. So you only trust the people or the traditions or the things happening within the distance of your bell tower. So if you can't, that distance where you can hear the bell ringing from your own bell tower, that's where you take pride. That's where you put your trust. So campanalismo is still very much alive and well here in Italy, especially here in southern Italy. So I'm going to go a little bit of campanalismo myself and talk about my region of Basilicata and the traditions and culture that we have here. Basilicata is a very small region. It's very rural. Traditionally, it was quite remote. It was considered a remote place. So the region has very distinct traditions that have been preserved because of that sort of isolation that they had historically, and because they were sort of looked down on. Each town had their own traditions and their own dialect. So this region holds their dialects very, very tightly. There's 90 dialects just in Basilicata. It's a very small region, and so it's almost every town. There's 131 towns in the region, and there are 90 dialects. So that tells you just how tightly they cling to that language that they grew up with, and that's been passed down generation to generation. So these dialects are very also closely tied to the culture here in Basilicata. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's impossible for us to learn the dialects because they vary from town to town and because it's not a written language. We've learned Italian well enough and we know a couple words of the dialect here in our town, but it's really hard to try and learn the dialect for us to speak it. But the small ones, they still are learning it in the home. They're even doing kind of cultural events or poetry and different kinds of things that focus on the dialect. There's some plays that are written in dialects that are very popular here in the region in the summertime especially. So that's one thing that's really very a rich part of the culture is the dialect in each town that they really still hold on to. So that's an interesting factor as you move around. There's a lot of different historical aspects to each dialect too. Some of them have Greek, some of them have Albanian. There's actually an ancient Albanian language that are still spoken in some towns here in Basilicata that were founded by refugees from Albania. There are elements of French and Spanish and all those different invaders that sort of rulers that were had sway over southern Italy through the centuries. So you find those aspects reflected in the dialects as well. Some of the traditions that are really beautiful that we get to participate in, since we can't participate in the dialect, we do get to participate in the festivals and the different events and the very unique things that happen here in this region. One of the things that I don't think happens anywhere else in Italy, I've never seen it in any other area, that is still very, very held here in Basilicata, 9 different towns. They do this arboreal rites. So there's these festivals that happen, they're kind of a mystic, strange ritual that they do, where they go out into the country, into the woods, and they cut down 2 trees separately. So they go one day to cut down one type of tree, and they go another day to cut down a different type of tree in a different part of the woods, and they're carried into town either by men on their shoulders or with oxen, and they're brought into the piazza separately, and then they're grafted together in a marriage ceremony. They call it the marriage of the trees. And so they graft these trees together, and then they raise it up as one big, giant, towering totem. And then this so-called marriage is consummated when youth of the town climb to the top of this totem. It's kind of dangerous to watch, but it's fascinating, and it's a very intriguing festival. It's a very primeval kind of a thing, and it's been going on for more than 1,000 years here in Basilicata. And then, like any marriage ceremony, there's dancing and eating and drinking in the presence of the couple, at the base of this towering tree, and is a fascinating thing that I've not seen anywhere else. It still happens here in Basilicata. In Matera, which is our best known city, it's the art city for Basilicata. It's was the cultural capital last year for Europe. So Matera has been put on the map, so to speak, and has been drawing a lot more people over the past couple of years. But they have a really beautiful ceremony tradition that is tied to the Madonna della Bruna, who is their patron saint. And so rather than just a normal procession, Matera builds this elaborate cart out of paper mache with figurines. It's just gorgeous to behold, and they hold a competition every year for the design of this cart that's going to carry the Madonna in her procession around the city. And it's very elaborate and very ornate, the way that they do these paper mache, kind of like a triumphal cart, basically, with angels and all these different elements that are attached to it. But Matera becomes a riotous event. Literally, it becomes a riot, because at the end, after they've taken the Madonna back to her church and put her safely away, hundreds of people attack this cart and they rip it to smithereens. It's this pagan kind of aspect to this religion festival that happens. It's amazing to watch. It's a little dangerous, of course, to be in the middle of the crowd, because hundreds of people are just attacking to get to this cart and rip it apart and get a piece of it to take home with them. If you are lucky enough to get a piece of an angel or a piece of this cart, they say it brings you good luck for the rest of the year. But they just completely destroy this cart that carried the Madonna. And the history behind that is that there was an overlord, a very heavy-handed ruler, who was also known to be rather tight-fisted in I think it was the 1400s or 1300s. He said that he would build a new cart for this procession every year, but they didn't really trust him to keep his word. So back for hundreds of years now, they've been tearing apart this cart to make sure that he was true to his word and would give them a new one for the festival each year. And so it's just become larger and larger through the years. But they have a lot of religious aspects in the morning that are still tied to this festival. And then they still do this very riotous thing afterwards, and the party then goes on all night long. And so it's a really big festival that's held on July 2nd every year in Matera. Another aspect here are we have Carnivale celebrations like anywhere else, but they're not those really ornate, elegant type of costumes. They're much more tied to the land here, much more tied to the rural aspects of life in Basilicata. So these are some things that have been going on for hundreds of years, where they dress up in one town like Capo, with really colorful ribbons hanging down. So some dress up in white and some in black to represent female or male cattle. They have giant cowbells and they ring them up and down the streets, and they do this very interesting procession. It's actually a lot of fun. It sounds very strange, and it actually is kind of strange, but it's a lot of fun. It's very traditional. It's one of those really unique things that you only find here. Several towns also have their own different takes on Carnavale as well. One town dresses up, they have men that dress up in trees with all this foliage, and they walk into town silently from the forest with this foliage on them, and it's called the forest that walks, literally translated into English, la foresta que camina. And it's a fascinating thing as well. So there's a lot of hidden festivals or cultural traditions here that you wouldn't find other places. And you really only find out about them when you live in a place or you come to a place regularly, like here in Basilicata. The life here is still very traditional. So you see the traditions played out actually just in daily life here. There's still the rhythm of the seasons. Most people still have their country property, that they have their gardens. They might have some hens for eggs. A lot of people still raise a pig every year to slaughter to make the salamis and prosciuttos and sausages and things. Our neighbors do. Several of our friends here in town still have these campagnas, it's called, a campagna. So we are the benefactors of a lot of their fruits and vegetables, which is wonderful. And we also get then these wonderful pork products from their pigs. We help with the wine harvest, so most people still have grapes and they make their own wine. And there's just these very long-standing traditions, that rhythm of life that is still very active here. They can vegetables for the use through the winter. I help our friends with their tomato sauce that they can and jar through the year to have through the year. So it's just a beautiful thing to see how everything is still very seasonal, and they still maintain all of these traditions that are passed down from the grandmothers. It's really just that slower aspect of life. It's a lot of work, of course, but they really take pride in it. They really know that these are products that are genuine. They call it genuino, with organic, grown themselves, jarred themselves, so they don't have to go to the store and buy those kind of things. And it's just an interesting rhythm to the lifestyle here. The food, of course, is different here than in a lot of other regions. So the pasta that we have here, the main pasta is called cavatelli. I'd actually done a tutorial video that if you want to learn how to make cavatelli, it's on there. So also orecchiette or strascinati are the three forms you find the most here in Basilicata. They all have the same base. So they're all using that durum flour. It's called semola, which is a double ground semolina flour. So it's finer than the semolina you find in the US, for example. No eggs. So this is an eggless pasta. It's great for vegans. It goes back to that poor traditions. They weren't going to waste an egg in the pasta. So these are the forms of pasta that they use here, whether they have just plain tomato sauce or a meat sauce. They make a lamb sauce here that's really wonderful. Lamb is a big thing. You see the sheep on the hillside, and so the lamb that they use in the kitchen, then they'll cook the bones in the sauce to make the lamb flavoring in their tomato sauce for celebrations, and it's a really delicious sauce. There's a lot of vegetable-based and legume-based sauces that we use here as well. But cavatelli is a major thing. You cannot pry a cavatelli out of the hands of a Basilicata resident on a Sunday. It's just obligatory that you are going to have homemade cavatelli on Sunday. That's just, it's still the big tradition here. And that's really a lot of fun. I do make it sometimes at home. I appreciate it all the more when I'm invited and get to eat it at someone else's house. So it's great that they still do that. They gather the whole family together on Sundays, and they have a 3-hour lunch, and it's just a really nice thing. Another food that we have here that you find basically only in Basilicata is called Pepperoni Cruschi. And these are dried sweet peppers, and they hang on like chili ristras. So when we first moved here, coming from New Mexico, we spent 20 years in Albuquerque. We saw these what we thought were chili peppers hanging. We thought, oh, great, they have chili. Well, they're sweet peppers that are dried in the same tradition, the same way. and then they're fried in olive oil, and they crumble them over top of pasta. So this is a really great thing. They try either over pasta or over fish or over chicken dishes. They use it in a lot of things, but the most traditional usage is that they saute stale breadcrumbs in olive oil with garlic and herbs, and then they crumble in these Pepperoni Kousky, and they put that on top of the Cavatelli or straccinati pasta. And it's a very old tradition here. It goes back hundreds of years to that peasant cooking tradition, and it's kind of one of the signature dishes here in Basilicata. So when you come, you definitely have to try that. And the Pepperoni Cruschi themselves, once they're fried, they're addictive. They're just like potato chips. You can't eat just one. They're crunchy in your mouth, and they have that sweet, peppery taste. They're just great as a snack as well. So that's one of the things that you find here in Basilicata. Another thing is the Caciocavallo cheese, but here it's Caciocavallo Podolico because it's made from the Podoligo race of the cow. The cattle is called Podoligo, and it's a rare kind of breed, and they produce less milk, but it's a kind of concentrated flavor, they say, that goes into this milk that they produce because of the herbs that they forage on the mountain hills. And it's actually one of the more expensive cheeses that you can buy in Italy because of that. We're lucky because we know producers here in our area, here in the mountains where we live, and we can go and buy it directly at a better price. It's a really excellent cheese. If you ever come across it, you should try it. It's called Caciocavallo because of their form. They're kind of like teardrop shaped balls with a little knob on top. And then they're hung, two of them together, kind of like a counterweight with a rope, and they're hung over a beam to age. And so that's saddlebags is where they get that name, the Caciocavallo, like a saddlebag. So my favorite way to eat Caciocavallo Podolico is at the street festivals. It's the best street food ever because they take that cheese and with that rope, they hang it over hot coals so it gets melty. And then they make bruschetta with bread on those coals. So they make nice grilled toasted bread, and then they slather off the cheese that's been melting over the coals and put it on the bruschetta, and it's just incredible. I go to street fairs or festivals just to eat this stuff. I love it. It's very addictive as well. It's one of those really great things here that we like. So these are just some of the traditional foods that you'll find in Basilicata. There's a lot of different dishes as you travel around the region that are made with local beans, for example. There's a lot of vegetables that are grown here in the region down near the Ionian Sea. There's a lot of fruits that are grown here. So we get a lot of fresh, in-season things as the year goes on. In the spring, we go foraging with our friends for wild asparagus. There's some areas that we know of now. Some people have shared their secret places with us where you can go and forage for wild asparagus, and that's a great thing to do in the springtime. So we just love the freshness. We like that people still eat with the seasons here, and that they still maintain those traditions of canning, of making jam, of making their own tomato sauce to put away, and making their own wine, and just all of those things that go along with kind of how life had been 60 or 70 years ago. They still keep that alive here, and that's just one of the really nice traditional aspects of life that we like. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about my region, exhibiting my campanellismo to you for Basilicata. And I hope that this is an interesting way to learn about Southern Italy.